Hi everybody. I think this time we have a slightly better situation than last. Sorry about the delay. Um, I don't know if Daniel's watching right now, but thanks for retweeting that. Appreciate it. And we are, I think, live. Let me know if we're not, if that works that way. So the purpose of this little get together, this little hangout, is to figure out uh, kind of if there's any last minute questions or concerns anyone has before we release the next version of Sails, and beyond that, just sort of taking a moment to help anybody through the upgrade, particularly things that would be helpful for other folks. And if you haven't read the upgrading guide, I'll post a link to that momentarily, and I'll tweet that out too, just to make sure that you've kind of gotten most of the things there. So you really probably don't actually need to do a whole lot, hopefully, but just in case I'm wrong, let me know. So I'm hearing what time the release will happen today. We avoided saying a time for a long period of time because we've been kind of adding stuff, fixing stuff, and so I think we're probably going to stretch that about as much as we can, but we will absolutely release it today. It may be more towards the end of the day. There's a punch list of remaining things to do that I will paste here as well. And that punch list is somewhat, I mean, basically it's just double checking on a few actual code issues, but most of it is looking up the new website, making sure that the links that were there before, or the links that Google has, are still going to work, so we don't like make a bunch of broken links out there. And I'll paste that in the chat here. But other than that, I'll just go based on what you guys post in the Q&A in this hangout. To the punch list. There's also, if you need help, kind of figuring out how to get into the question section, which I had no idea how to do this last time. I made a little gist, and I tweeted that earlier, but I'll also paste it right there as well. So, right on. What's the first thing that we want to go over? Nick, have you seen anything? I'll leave IRC open as well. Whoever said something about putting on pants, no need. I am completely naked. So I will. I'll just start going down Twitter and IRC if I don't see any other questions in the actual little Q&A deal here. Yes, you can ask on IRC. And if you want to actually ask on the air, you can, and I'll put you online. Chad, if you're watching this, it is in YouTube, but it's a live stream, and apparently refreshing. Okay, yes. All right, well, if I'm just kind of running down the list of Twitter stuff in the meantime, there's a few things coming up. There's All Things Open in September, which is in October in Raleigh, North Carolina. If you're in that area, I'll be doing a talk there, and that's on Twitter as well. Also, before that, there's Powered by JavaScript at the Manning. It's a Manning conference, and that's in September in St. Louis, Missouri, and then in Indianapolis in late September. There's I have my list somewhere here, but there's something else going on in Indianapolis in late September, and I'm sorry I'm forgetting right now. And Courtney's going to post the details. All right, so Chubbs. What is the logic from IRC? Chubbs, let me know and I'll put you online if you want to talk. If you give me like your Google your Gmail account, I'll add it on here. So he says, what is the logic between services being injected automatically into code? In some areas of my code, it seems services can be referenced without having to require the file. So cool, yeah, I can answer this right now. Definitely, if there's anything that's 0.10 specific, let's focus on that. But in lieu of that, I'll just start here. So if I'll go on a screen share really quick, and right, you can probably see my desktop, I hope. Okay. So right, and I go in and I start making some foo service. What Sails does is I put in here module.exports. I can put 3. It doesn't matter. That thing is now going to be globalized as foo service throughout my code. So anywhere, once Sails is loaded, right, this will be available. So I can go in and, if I make and if I have a, let's just do this again. There we go. If I in and say foo service, that's going to be because at this point in the code, because this function is going to run, this is a controller action, it's going to run whenever it's routed to, right? Like whenever a request comes in, and I'm just sending a response to be whatever's in foo service. Now this is number 3, so this is actually going straight through to the underlying, Express server, and that's going to understand that as a status code of 3. So that's kind of a weird example. But let's just say that instead of in here that says hello world, that's a more normal thing. So that's just going to send that back down. And if I lift, and the reason I'm able to even access that controller action is because by default you've got this blueprint action config turned on. So, which is right here. So that's any controller that you have that has an action. It's going to be the controller identity, which is user, all lowercase, and then the action name, which is find. So if I go to user/find, I get hello world. And I think I'm actually have like a weird version of something locally, but it's mixing in identity and global ID here. But basically, I was able to access it is what matters. So the the place where I couldn't access this thing would be out here, and I can't access it out there because Sails hasn't loaded yet when this file gets required. So all of the various files in your project get loaded by something called the module loader, which is a hook in Sails core, and when that's one of the first things that happens when Sails lifts, but it has not exposed all of the globals in your project yet, because you can imagine if foo service got loaded after user controller, foo service wouldn't exist yet, and so just basically any globals in your project, the only time you should expect to have access to them are once Sails has loaded. So that's in any kind of like request handling code, like a controller action that could be in a policy, any function that you put somewhere that would get run later, but not outside of your module exports. And even if I did like foo service, this is still going to evaluate immediately when this file gets required, right? Like if I just go to the command line and I type node API services foo service, it doesn't exist. It's undefined, so it's not going to set this to anything, because when it runs this file, this doesn't exist. So okay, does that help answer the question? Or we can you're welcome to come onto the air if you want. So Chubb says, the reason I'm asking this question is that I want to define a helper function service, and I want to be able to generate readable URLs through a service. But if he references a service in the before create or before update in his model, it says the service is undefined. And I think the reason that's happening is that you probably have code in your bootstrap.js file, config/bootstrap, and that runs when Sails is loading. And so when that's running, it's likely that the globals haven't been exposed yet. Yeah. Okay. So I'll jump back into questions here. Is there a core namespace, our friend Wesley, is there a core namespace list to be aware of when naming services? Well, you definitely shouldn't name them anything that is that looks like it would be a node global that would already be existing. Something on the global object like process would be probably a pretty bad idea. But something that I would suggest and that I try to do is just name services as, with the service suffix, and that way you never have any kind of clash. The other option is if you're worried about it, or if you run into an issue when you're trying to debug something, you can always go into globals.js in your config. I'll share that. Okay, let's not do it quite that way. Can you guys see it now? Yes, okay. And in globals.js, there's actually, you can turn off underscore, async, or rather Lodash. Both of those are globalized by default just for convenience. Just right out of Sails core, you can turn that off and require it just like any other node project. The Sails global that represents the app that you're, it's kind of like your Express app instance. This is the Sails app instance that represents the app you're in. It's globalized. And then there's options here to globalize your services and models, and you can turn both of those off. So if you turn all of these to false, or if you, instead of providing an object here, you just set this to like, then you won't have any globals anymore that are being provided. Okay, so I can connect dynamic base data, assuming that's database in this version of Sails. Louise, what do you mean when you say dynamic database? And I can try to add you to this conversation too, so you can answer. I guess just to take a wild guess, what I would think that meant is probably that you were talking about being able to add new databases at runtime. And I can answer. I mean, that's a valid question. So if you have, if you're building an app that the purpose of the app is to interact with multiple different databases, can you do that in Sails? Absolutely. You're just going to be doing it like you would in any other Node app. If you want to use Waterline to do that, currently in Waterline, it's not a kind of public API to be able to connect to new databases or disconnect from new databases. There's definitely ways you can call out to the adapter directly, but I would advise that if you're making an app that's purpose is to connect to lots of different databases, that you look at that you maybe either dive into the core of Waterline or look at just requiring the raw drivers themselves in your Sails app. Okay, cool. So Vado requests. What's the best way to deal with some stuff that aren't services but are required by a controller? Because it's not loaded, Sails autoloads controllers, and the app crashes because the controller itself uses stuff that hasn't been loaded yet. So I'm assuming this is when you do a require. I wish I could actually just let you guys talk somehow. But yeah, and nonetheless, Yeah, I'll just answer it regardless. So I don't know exactly what you mean, but if you're talking about just kind of like where's the best way to put stuff, the services are just sort of a convenient catch-all that the purpose of them is to hold code that isn't related to any particular model even. And I think that's still something that's sort of a personal choice at this point. I think that something that we've been working on with hooks and kind of some other ideas that have arisen in the future, I think we'll be able to provide some more conventions. But at the moment, think about a service as just a little node module. You could just as easily publish that on npm and require it, or just put it in like a lib folder and require it. And in fact, a lot of people just require stuff from the services directory and turn off globals so that that's what they're more comfortable with. That's a totally valid way to do it. Okay, so I can upgrade only Waterline and an old version of Sails. That's a good question. I think that I haven't tried it, honestly. If you think about what the differences are, I think it probably wouldn't work, to tell you the truth, because the new Waterline expects this concept of connections, which are like data sources. So whereas before you had this adapters config, in Sails.10 you have this connections config, which is really just a bunch of different databases that you can pick from. And you might have 3 different connections that all share the same adapter. Like the adapter is like whether it's HDMI or VGA, and like the connection is like what are you plugging into, right? Is it the projector? Is it your desk? I don't know. Okay. What is the best way to support? And sorry if I'm hitting these out of order. I'll try to look at them here. Okay, so what is the best way to support long-running requests like a CPU-intensive task? Is Parallel.js or similar supported? So let me just lost the question. I don't know if I accidentally deleted it somehow or it just disappeared. So sorry, whoever that was, but we got to read it. So the answer to that is, is Parallel.js supported? I'm assuming that's a node module. Any node module is supported because this is a node framework that's built on the foundations that kind of everybody's using in Node at the moment. So like you can, require and node modules and stuff all work just the same way they normally do. So you can require Parallel.js. You can use async, Calalan's async, right, and do like an async dot. I think workers would probably work, or queue. I would throw out there though that until you've benchmarked whatever problem you're having, I wouldn't assume that I wouldn't choose a solution before you guaranteed you have a problem, right? Okay, so is there a core namespace list viewer of name services? We got that one. Will the new version of Sails use the latest version of Waterline? Yes. What is the best way to support long-running requests? We just covered that. Cool. So Connor, you notice issues with the MySQL adapter. I would maybe we can take that offline. You can, if you can point me in the direction of the issue, I'll take a closer look and see if I can't figure out what we're talking about. But my guess is that I know that there's been. I was just talking to Doug actually last night, and he was saying that there was an issue with basically connections just not working. Like connections would be stale and hanging out and no longer effective, like TCP connections to the MySQL database. And by pinging those connections first, you kind of reawaken them. I don't know if the connection pool is leaking connections at some point, but if it's something, I guess the question would be if you're having an issue in Node MySQL as well, let's bring it to the Node MySQL repo and cover it there. Otherwise, let us know. We can, if you make an issue, which you may already have done in the Sails MySQL thing, we can figure out why Sails MySQL would leak and Node MySQL wouldn't. We haven't seen anything like that ourselves, but we may be the usage pattern. We're also not really using MySQL right now, so that would actually be why. So What are the major new features in Sails 0.10 and Waterline 0.10? What types of issues should we specifically be watching out for when upgrading? That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. One of the biggest things to point you guys to while we're on this call, I think, is this kind of vortex. All right, so this is the beta.sails.js at our website. At some point today, we're going to move this over to sails.js.org, and it will be the new Sails website. This is a complete revamp of the docs that have been updated to reflect what's, in some cases, will, be a lot more accurate, but also just try to focus on providing like complete low-level coverage of everything that's happening versus kind of touchy-feely high-level stuff, which I want to get more to that later, but at this point it's honestly, for everybody that's using this framework, you got to be able to find a definitive answer on something more quickly. So that was kind of our first goal. So as far as what's new and where to find an upgrading guide, right now if you go to, actually there's an easier way to get to this, if you go to support on the new Sails website, and you'll know you're here because of this new squid. See, this is Squiddy 2.0. He looks a little hungover potentially, but he has lots of electronics. So if you go to the support section and then go to version notes and check out the 0.9, 0.10 migration guide, this will actually just forward you to the concept section, which is probably not where this will always live, but we have a documentation build process set up for some of this stuff, and it's easiest to put it here for right now. So so there's a lot of new stuff, new in the slight changes. There's almost none of it should break existing 0.9 apps. I think even as far as like sockets, there's the Sails socket client on the front end, which is obviously optional, but it's been enhanced a little bit. It now has API versioning, so things are set up in Sails so that if you try to connect to Sails 0.10 with the 0.9 socket client, everything should just work. Obviously I don't know how obviously, actually the biggest thing is associations. Apparently that link doesn't work. That's something we should fix. But associations in the sense of, I guess, extremely high level overview of that is if you have, for whatever reason, classic pet shop example where you have 20 dogs and each dog has an owner, being able to represent that, especially in a relational database, without having to use foreign keys directly. So, whereas in the past you might have your user perhaps might have no reference to the dog on it, but your dog model might have a foreign key value, which would be like a number, right? Or if you're using Mongo, a object ID. But and granted, in Mongo especially, there's ways to get around this by embedding certain pieces of content or data, and that works pretty well. And still, that's going to be the way you want to do things sometimes. But the advantage of associations is that as you jump around between different databases, you have this consistent kind of interface for dealing with, particularly the more complex sorts of associations like many-to-many, where maybe a dog has two owners and an owner might have multiple dogs as well. And those could be different dogs even. I won't get too deep into the details of how association works right now because there's a lot of questions, but that's by far the biggest change in 0.10, and that's what one of the reasons why it took so long to get to. Associations in Sails, is important to point out, are supported cross-adapter, or in cross-database. So if you have a legacy MySQL database and you need to be able to query users from that database while querying users, or either a different set of users or all of these dogs everywhere from like Mongo or Redis, you can do that, and you've always been able to do that. You can have associations that span adapters or span databases. The only caveat to that is that if you were going to populate the dogs that say one of these guys in this legacy database had, you can't limit, skip, or sort on that cross-adapter, cross-database population join. And there's some details about that are some of the things I want to add as little notes to the docs. But within the same adapter, so if you have a MySQL database, you can, or a Mongo database or a Redis database that you're working with, and you have users and you have these dogs, then Sheila has 40 dogs, and those 40 dogs might also belong to other folks. You can find the top, you know, you can find Sheila and her 10 oldest dogs, right? And then you can find the next 10 dogs and so forth. And that works great. So the other big thing was file uploads. So I don't know how closely everyone followed the situation with or it wasn't even really a situation, but just the realization that kind of the community had about the body parser that everyone was using by default, like the HTTP body parser. And what that meant is that, or what was going on is someone would upload a file, and just like in PHP and in a lot of other frameworks, before the file ever is accessible to you, or before your code ever runs in your app, the file actually just ends up getting written to disk first. And there's different ways around that to kind of like poke a hole in the body parser for particular routes, or you could do it holistically. The only problem is if you don't have that happen with the temp file, and you would like copy the temp file, then you're kind of disabling the body parsing everywhere. And a lot of times, if you have AJAX requests or forms that you send in, you kind of want that stuff to be parsable, and you want to be able to access the data without having to work with streams directly. So one of the things we did, and you can still configure this, right? So if you want to use the original body parser so your code will work, absolutely. That might be if you have file uploads in your app from a 0.9 project, that'll be the first thing you'll want to deal with. If you don't, though, and you're planning on adding file uploads, you might wait and do it the new way. It's using a project called Skipper that we put together, and I won't go too deep into the details there, but there's some we spent a lot of time trying to solve this problem, and I think we made some steps. I think that it's going to be an ongoing process of kind of getting things like thumbnailing taken care of, and trying to improve the kind of usability, I guess. But the idea is that you can do multiple file uploads with streaming while not having to worry about handling the raw streams to get your simple text parameters when you're not doing file uploads. So it's file uploads when you need it that are safe in streaming, and someone uploads a terabyte file to your server, they won't crash the server because it fills up the hard drive. Okay, so next question. I'm going to try to go. I'm not quite sure when these are coming in, so if I'm going out of order, guys, let me know. But what is the best way to support long-running requests? So we talked about that. Okay, what is the best way? It's the same question. Is there a way to use MySQL to store Sails sessions, so database? Yes, in 0.10 there is, from Andrea. So yes, there is. Basically, if you go and look at any of the Connect session adapters, as of 0.10, they're all supported in Sails. So anything that's a Connect session adapter, if you go into your Sails.js config, you can, I think, even type the name of the adapter, if I'm remembering correctly. These are not Waterline adapters, right? These are Connect session adapters. And I can, I'll double check to make sure that we're covered on the docs there. But something else, and what I'm going to try to be very consistent about, especially since we have so much coverage now, is keeping pretty tight coverage of this stuff in our documentation. So the place where you would find this, and I don't know if it's here yet, but if you go in the docs and you look under reference, this is kind of where the raw stuff is. So all the actual methods that you would call, the things you can do in the command line interface. If you're dealing with the Blueprint API, it's, what does the API doc really look like? If this was something that you were integrating with and it was a black box. The model methods that are available through Waterline, and then just to cover everything, we got WebSockets, the resourceful pub sub, the socket client methods, and then Sails.sockets, which is just a wrapper around the raw socket.io stuff, but done in that way so that it'll sort of future-proof our implementation as it evolves. So Sails.config.session, there's a bit of coverage in here. It talks about the shared Redis session store. I know for a fact I added a little error message in here if you put something weird into this config. So you might just kind of give it a shot and see what happens, and I think it'll point you in the right direction. All right, so next one. All right. Yes, and we can, so this will, as far as Louis, your question about publishing the answers to the questions, so this video will be on YouTube, and what we can do is double check and kind of add this to the list of stuff that we know people could use help with. A lot of these are, I know at least a few of these are things we should take offline and sort out, but I think a lot of them would also be useful, and what I would point everybody in the direction of is the Sails 101 repo, which if anyone has a thought or something they want to add to this, use the docs and the help. But I'll paste a link in the chat in this Hangout on air situation here. But this has stuff like, I'll put it on the screen for a second so you can see it. This covers a lot of things. Basically, the idea here is, the format is take a question, like how do I use res.ok, or how do I work directly with Sails sockets, how do I configure Redis as my session store, how do I use .native to perform a raw Mongo query, and then the answer is Sails new Mongo native queries, push to this repo, and answer the question. And maybe you don't even, like here, a lot of these are things that I would normally be making these to test people's issues or just to kind of verify to myself that something works the way I think it does, where maybe it's that particular combination of things isn't tested. I'm trying to preserve that, and so anyone else doing that, that'd be great. So next, and Courtney pointed out, transcripts are also available. They get automatically generated by our mine lords at Google, apparently. So I've seen what is the best way to support long-running requests come up a few times. I think it might have just double posted, so we'll make sure we cover that, or we can at least point to where the transcript is. So what's the best way to work with test-driven development in Sails? Mocha, Wolfpack. I don't know anything about Wolfpack. We use Mocha for just about all of our tests. So I like it. There's a project called Sails Generate Test and there's also Sails Generate Test Harness. They're in various stages of completion. It actually wouldn't be too hard to get it done. I just haven't spent the time yet to do that. But if anyone wants to contribute, let me know. Either here or on Twitter, ideally, because then I'll definitely see it and be able to add you. Okay, so I can do user.populate model. Exactly, that's what associations let you do. What are the next big goals that Sails is going to have in the next 6 to 12 months? That's a good question. That is probably going to have a longer answer than I should spend answering it right now. Just because there's a lot of 0.10 stuff I want to cover today because of the day it is. I would say maybe we can tackle that in more detail next week. But I can tell you, like, the broad overarching goals are to take a look at upgrading Socket.io to Socket.io 1, potentially using Primus. I want to finish pulling out the hook system that we have currently so that we can completely modularize those hooks. Right now there's 20 hooks in Sails core. If you remove those hooks, Sails is essentially exactly the same thing as Express, and it's a real-time compatible version of Express, I guess, and it's not even I think that there's some nice cleanup we'll be able to do there that will take this request interpreter that we have, this kind of virtual router, and we'll be able to simplify stuff and remove a lot of code, and hopefully make things a lot easier to test. That's one of the biggest goals for Sails itself. Now for Waterline, I'll cover that more maybe next time because there's a lot there. But the biggest goals for me in the 6 to 12 month range, that's a big range. And in the 6-month range, I think I'd really like to see basically I'd like to see us kind of go and help the community Oracle and Microsoft SQL and DB2 adapters out a little bit. Their Cody, aka Particle Banana, just finished writing up a Waterline SQL module, which can be required from different adapters and shared. So a lot of the SQL generation logic that you would need to write your own adapter, you can rely on that now. So it should be easy to do things like SQLite. And I know there's actually a few SQLite projects out there. Hopefully we can kind of smash that stuff together and really try to come to a consensus on the one to use. Because I know there's a lot of people that have different needs. I saw there was an OrientDB adapter that came out recently. I'll leave it at that for now. To answer Sam's question, migrations beyond safe and alter, are there plans? Not immediate plans, no. Absolutely aspirations to do that, and it's going to be quite a lot of effort to do it. However, there's been some work already done in that direction by Danny Friedland, aka Blue Hot Dog, and he and his colleague have a pretty cool project that'll let you do manual migrations. It hasn't been upgraded to 0.10 yet, and I owe him a helping hand. Just haven't had the time quite yet to do it. For auto migrations, yeah, I mean, my vision has always been that auto migrations just work. And then there's another level of migrations beyond that, which is if you have data in MySQL and you switch databases to Mongo, that MySQL data could be transitioned into Mongo and vice versa. That's actually easier, but not something that we should focus on right now because there's other higher priority stuff. All right, yeah, so we're running out of time, I think. So I'm going to answer these really quick. Okay, so do you plan to integrate some things that would help developers working with Sails? So Meteor includes native code refresh, which is super great. The time loss developed due to restart stuff is a lot. Yes. It is annoying, isn't it? I completely agree. It's one of those things that is not quite annoying enough to become a priority, but I think it would really help us out for sure, and I can imagine just about everybody wants it. If it was really easy to do, I would have already done it. The reason why it doesn't happen right now is because it's kind of back to what I said earlier about the hooks. The hook initialize methods are not idempotent right now, or idempotent, I never know how to pronounce that. But they don't, you can't call them over and over again and have them have the same effect. So if I could certainly just kill the Sails process and start it back up. And you can, something that might be helpful to those either changing the server code a lot is if you run forever-w and then app.js from within your Sails project. And there's different ways to do this with like PM2 and stuff. I just remember that because I'm an old fogey. So if you do it that way with forever-w app, it'll watch for changes in that directory, and if any occur, or I think actually in any of the files that app requires, and if that happens, it'll kill the process and start it up again. It's not quite as nice as if it flushed the router and started it up again, which we've done, and that works pretty well. The tricky part gets when you change a model and it needs to migrate the data. So I think something that might be helpful there that'll happen more short term is when Grunt is kind of compiling your stuff, having a page letting you know that, because it sometimes can be extremely confusing if something hasn't finished compiling yet, especially for people that aren't on solid-state drives. Like a spinning disk drive might take 15 seconds on a really big project, and we've had trouble with that before. So that's something that we will totally get to. So Jeff Parrish, will docs for 0.9 continue to be available? Yes. So on that punch list I was mentioning earlier, which it's in the chat here if you want to look at it, I talk a little bit about that. I'll show you my screen for a second, and for context of what this will probably look like, this is 08x.sails.js.org. Basically all we did, for simplicity, is take a snapshot of the Sails website when we upgraded to 0.9, and we just threw it on this subdomain, just on a different server even, just because we were lazy, and we had a modulus thing going, and we just wanted to deploy it there, because it took 5 seconds. So we'll do the same thing for 0.9 because it's quick. I don't think that I'll probably go through the trouble of actually breaking off all the other parts of the site and deleting them and just leaving the docs like we did here. I think we'll just probably turn off the robots.txt file or set it to disallow so that we don't confuse search engines and people search for answers and they're like, this is not relevant anymore. Okay. I haven't messed with it recently, but I know it was in progress last time I checked. How are multi-level populations going? That is something we can cover next time we do one of these after the 0.10 release. There is a project going that basically kind of like a Waterline 2. I don't know if it actually means Waterline 2 or anything. It's just kind of an exploration of what it would take to get there. They do kind of work in that project, and if you're curious or interested in contributing, I definitely recommend checking it out. So has many through associations or many-to-many through associations are being developed for Waterline. That actually is possible currently in Sails 0.10. I don't know how well it's documented. I know that we have a spot in our docs about it. If you go to under concepts in the documentation and then go to Waterline ORM, associations, and through associations. Oh gosh, well it's here, but it says that it's not supported yet, so I see why you thought that. So we can totally make a point to mention that. It does work. I know it works because I was using it. And essentially, all you're doing with that is saying, hey, I have these users and these pets, and maybe instead of owning the pets, these users give these pets these treats, and so you might have this treat model. Whereas, in that other situation, the treat model is sort of implicit. Maybe we start caring about what kind of treats it was, right? Like these were salty snack treats or like fishy salmon treats, right? So it's when you need to start storing more information about that sort of a many-to-many association that you need the through table, and that is possible. And I say table, but it could be anything, a collection in Mongo or Redis. Using forever as a temporary solution, yeah, that's the best I can think of myself. That's I'm with you. Is there a core namespace list? We covered that. Is there a correct way to register global middleware that's processed for both HTTP and socket requests? The way Chad's doing it right now is to define a /* route that behaves as express middleware. That's perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what I do. You can make a hook and do it that way. I mean, if you're comfortable with the route, I would stick with that. Of course, you can do it in a policy as well, but if you need it to apply to things that are not controlled by controller actions, then that's not going to work because policies only apply to controller actions. So just to clarify, this is a question from before. Can you do multiple populates? Can you do populate X model, populate Y model? Not in this release, but next week we can talk about more kind of where that stands right now. And it's actually a lot closer, I think, than I expected it to be at this time. What is the best? Okay, no, sorry, we already covered that. And regarding 0.9, will there be continued support for 0.9, or will 0.9 version be completely deprecated and the default answer be upgrade to 0.10? It depends on what we're talking about. So if there's a crucial issue that we encounter for 0.9 that's causing servers to crash, I'd love to take care of that. it's, we have some 0.9 stuff that's out there. We have some older stuff than that that's out there. Um, the the default answer is going to be, can you upgrade to 0.10? Because you should totally upgrade to 0.10 if you can, because that's where the new development is going to take place, and that's where a lot of the answers are going to be, honestly. But yeah, we're still going to be looking at it, and any kind of major issue, please let us know, because we have stuff out there too. I think we did it. I think we made it through the list. And if any of these questions that are up currently are not duplicates, let me know. But I think we covered all of them. I'll check IRC one more time, and then I'm gonna have to bail for a meeting, unfortunately, because that's my favorite thing to do. The response contract has changed in 0.10. It now has headers, right? So yeah, and the Sails.io client now is a full simulation of an HTTP request. You still get the body, but you actually can get access to headers when you send socket requests. It is a breaking change, but it's only a breaking change if you replace the file. If you use the old Sails socket client, everything should work great. Because it recognizes that, and the new socket client has an API version that it sends when it sends a connection string to the server to upgrade to do the socket IO thing, magic thing. So we grab the version string, look at that, and say, oh, this version, this is for version 0.10 of the socket client itself. So it'll be a breaking change, but only if you make a new Sails project or go change your client-side JavaScript SDK file. And yeah, it's cool because you can actually do things with headers, and you can really treat stuff that normally you would have had to do as Ajax with sockets. Is there a way to inject where company rec session CID query globally for every find method? There's always a way, but no, not a public API that's documented. I totally get why that would be useful, or even to be able to scope that. To a certain controller or action. I guess action would be kind of the same thing. I guess action would be useful though. But yeah, that's not covered right now, but that's a totally valid feature request. And actually, yeah, so Nick just suggested you can make a policy that will, if you're using blueprints, you can then add something on direct.options or add a fake parameter that happens on the back end. Totally valid. That's only if you're using blueprint actions that you can get away with that. But if you are, that's fantastic. Okay, so I think that we made it through the questions so far. If anyone has, we got a few more minutes. If anyone has anything that is 0.10, especially anything 0.10 related. All right. Well, I think let's go ahead and call it early then for this time, and then maybe we can get together. Those of you that especially are interested in kind of the roadmap stuff, and particularly what's going on with Waterline and the next steps. I'd like to have Cody on here too when we do that. And yeah, there's just to give you a little bit of a taste, I guess. The stuff that is on my mind is the next priority is transactions support that's native to the ORM. Probably not cross-adapter transaction support, but single database transaction support is giving you a nice standardized API to access that's database agnostic. And obviously it's not going to be supported in every case, but that's fine. And then the migrations is further off, I think, honestly. Auto migrations is, at least. But on a brighter note, I guess, multiple levels of populations. So if you wanted to get you wanted to get all of your friends' moms, and you wanted to get their moms, and you wanted to get their angriest mom, that's actually not too far off. I just saw a question about Microsoft SQL. I was saying earlier that's a relatively important short-term goal, I think, for us, is to there's actually use cases where it would be where we need it anyways. So yeah, that's something that, especially since Cody pulled out the SQL, the Waterline SQL library, it should be a lot easier to kind of help normalize all of these different adapters that work slightly differently. And I'll use SQL. Regarding the new Sails.io socket, is there any reason why the request headers can only be set using request? No, I would love to. If you have a different way of setting that up, I'm on board. I think that it may have just been that I didn't want to change the function signature on people, and it would be weird to put something after the callback, right? Because right now the signature goes, so io.socket.get URL params callback, and the params are optional. I think I could easily just have it be, if you provide an object for both params and headers, and then the last argument would be callback, that would work. I think it was just kind of like, well, this is easy for now, and we didn't need to send headers from the front end at that time. But yeah, that would be totally good change. Okay, so then just to sum up what we were saying earlier about Waterline. So aside from populate deep and getting your friends' moms, and the 30 friendliest, 30 with the best cookies. Now the 30 with the best cookies is an interesting point. So that's more of a what you call like a where subquery, I think. So if you want to find your mom's mom, you can do that with populate deep. That's actually, we had that kind of experimentally supported in that other sort of Waterline 2 thing we were talking about. If you wanted to get you wanted to find your friends, but you wanted to get your friends, the top 5 friends of yours whose moms make the best cookies, right? That kind of involves like taking that extra hop in order to qualify a result. So you have to qualify your friend. You kind of got to go meet her mom, right? And see how good those cookies are. So that's and realistically, there's actually a lot of use cases where a one-hop version of that's really useful. A one-hop version of that also works in the Waterline 2 repo I was talking about earlier. Once again, that is not like something that's immediate term ready, but it's something like that's, if you want to see what's coming next and you want to get involved with that, that's where to look right now. Someone asks, who am I wearing? Will it be possible soon to have policies like foo this policy or other one? I don't understand, unfortunately. Whose mom makes the best cookies? Valid question. I don't know if my mom's listening or not, so I don't think she is. I don't think she knows. I don't think she'd be able to get on Hangouts. I couldn't figure out how to get on Hangouts, honestly, so I don't think. I think that about sums it up, guys. Thank you all for joining, and I'm really excited about having this finally come out today. I appreciate your patience. So, definitely let us know if anything crazy comes up, and we'll plan on this coming out towards the end of today. Thanks, guys.